Morning and welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is part 2 in our 3-part series on how to start, grow, and ultimately maintain a dominating law firm website. Today we're going to talk about the grow phase for DUI defense lawyers. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available to replay online tomorrow. For that reason, there's no need to take notes. We'll also make the slides available to you at that time. This webinar is scheduled to run for about 2 hours. This is the second webinar that we've done in this Grow series, and the last one that we did on business law ended up lasting a little bit over the 2-hour mark, but we're going to try to keep it right around the 2 hours. We're not going to be able to stop during the course of the presentation to answer questions, but if you do have technical difficulties with either the audio or the video, please let us know via the chat area of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll see what we can do to help out. We will have a questions and answer session at the end of this webinar, and so if you do have questions along the way, feel free to put them in the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll address them all at one time at the end. My name is Dan Jaffe. Before becoming the full-time CEO of LawLytics, I built 2 successful law firms in different states, first in Washington State and then in Arizona. During that time, my practice concentrated highly on DUI and impaired driving defense. During the later years of my practice, I also started a highly successful online directory for DUI attorneys, and that directory was later acquired by a large internet company, which really gave me the time and the working capital to start LawLytics, which I'll get to in a moment. During my years of practice, I made a lot of marketing investments, and I also got badly burned several times. For that reason, I realized that nobody cared about my practice like I did, and that in order for me to be successful in my marketing, I needed to understand how the internet really worked, and I needed to ultimately be in control of my marketing. I did the heavy lifting of figuring things out back then, and today I love showing my fellow attorneys how this stuff really works. If you attended the first webinar in this series, you're already familiar with our presenters who are going to be continuing their presentations today. I'm going to either introduce or reintroduce, as the case may be, each of them to you now so we can jump from one presenter to the next without delay once we do get started. Our first speaker today is Rachel Shalat. Rachel holds a JD and a master's in practice law before joining LawLytics. She's the Vice President of Content Operations here at LawLytics, which means that she's in charge of all of the written content that we produce for our clients, and that amounts to millions of written words each year. In last month's webinar, Rachel demonstrated the basic building blocks of the content that's needed to get started with a DUI website in the right direction. Today, Rachel will build on that information and take you deeper into the strategy and execution of growing a DUI defense web presence. After Rachel, Sophia Oliboni will be speaking. She holds a master's degree in web design and is a design specialist here at LawLytics. When new members sign up for our service, she and her team help them choose their design preferences based on their goals. In last month's webinar, Sophia presented the basic considerations for starting a web presence. Today, Sophia's segment will take you deeper into the design considerations that can influence the growth and effectiveness of your law firm's website. After Sophia, Victoria Blute will talk about several things. She comes from a journalism background and is a community manager here at LawLytics. If you're a frequent reader of our blog, you're undoubtedly already familiar with her work. And if you've sat in on some of our past webinars, you'll recognize her voice immediately. Last webinar in this series, which was last month, Victoria went into great detail about how the search engines work and about the various types of content that lawyers should include when they're starting their website. Today, Victoria is going to talk about something that she does quite frequently here at LawLytics, which is social media. And she's going to show you how social media can work with your law firm's website to amplify your firm's signal and extend your reach and reinforce your reputation. When Victoria is done, I'm going to present some growth strategies that consistently work for our members when done over time. And these are some of the same strategies that I used in my practice as well. Before we get to our presenters, I want to spend a bit of time on a few foundational items. Before I turn the mic over to Rachel, I'm to talk about content. I want to briefly review who we are and what we do and why it matters for those of you who are not yet familiar with us. You have many choices of companies and technologies to design, build, host, and help you market your law firm's website. At LawLytics, we certainly do all that, and we also have a lot of competition. So what is LawLytics and how are we different? Our company is obsessed with the pursuit of the most efficient method of marketing for each law firm. As we see it, there are two major variables of efficiency, time and money. LawLytics was created to empower law firms to have unlimited marketing success without wasting either time or money. As we see it, we have two different types of competitors. On the one side are full-service marketing companies such as FindLaw and Martin Del Nolo, and LawLytics is built to give attorneys all of the upside of using full-service companies without exposing you to the potential downsides and risks. On the other side of the equation are do-it-yourself website software programs such as WordPress and Wix and Weebly. And these types of programs tend to be very inexpensive or even free to use. They also happen to come with steep opportunity costs, and attorneys often struggle to make them work and in the process waste time and miss clients and opportunities along the way. While both full-service companies and do-it-yourself platforms are viable options, LawLytics offers, in our opinion, a more practical solution for lawyers. Our company works exclusively with lawyers, and our services are adaptable to every stage of a law firm's growth. Our members can literally start as small as they choose and grow as big as they decide without taking dangerous risks or committing to things that might not work. And our software was built exclusively for lawyers, so the learning curve is easy, enabling our members to add to and edit their websites and really turn their efforts into new business without struggling. Here at LawLytics, we talk differently than most legal marketing companies. And that's because between myself and our investors, we have over 40 years of experience as lawyers in private practice, owning and managing our own law firms. We know what it's like to worry about marketing. We know what it's like to worry about payroll. We know what it's like to balance the management of the business aspects of a practice while trying to be present in court and taking care of our clients and doing a great job all the way around. After our three speakers, I'm going to start my presentation with this slide that you're looking at right now. At that time, I'll show you why the above measurements are really the only ones that matter when it comes to building your DUI defense website. There are a lot of law firm marketing vendors who trade in secret formulas, incantations, magic tricks, and assorted forms of snake oil. My presentation will focus on the things you see listed in this slide. Our thesis here at LawLytics is that all successful law firm marketing begins and also ends with these key performance indicators. It's all about making your marketing work without wasting time or money. As a lawyer, I want to encourage you to be a student of your own business and to be brutally honest with yourself and with your staff about your marketing, and to insist that any marketing vendors you engage are also brutally honest with you as well. The metrics that you see on this slide provide a true north. They speak clearly and they cut through the noise and the distractions. And the signal they provide can really light the way for any law firm to grow to meet even their biggest, hairiest, and most audacious goals. I look forward to talking with you after our three excellent speakers. And with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Rachel, who's going to talk about content and growing your DUI defense website. Rachel?
Thank you, Dan. As it was mentioned earlier, prior to joining LawLytics, I practiced criminal defense in Pennsylvania, and I currently oversee the LawLytics content department. We work with our attorney clients to plan, create, and refine their web content. If you were with us during the start series of this webinar, one of the last things I spoke about was collecting data. And as Dan just said, being a student of your own practice is very, very critical to a variety of aspects of your marketing. And I discussed tracking the types of clients your firm is attracting, the types of cases you seem to be getting most often, examining larger trends in your geographic area to kind of see which areas you should focus your content creation efforts the most heavily upon. And now that we're entering into the grow phase, it becomes the time to act on that data by allowing it to influence your marketing strategy in terms of custom tailoring your content to meet the areas where you're noticing the biggest need, or an area you've identified upon which you can capitalize the most. And for firms who are in this situation, we urge you to allow the data that you're collecting to help guide your marketing strategy, but not to be too trigger happy. And what I mean by this is, let's say that you've launched a DUI site, and over the course of the first year, you're seeing a lot of cases from a local university. And the bulk of your client base is college students, and a lot of the people who are contacting your firm are parents, and they're arranging representation of their children. Now, this data should definitely help guide your content strategy. And so far as this should be one of the primary areas in which you're focusing your content creation efforts. However, we do caution against kind of getting trigger happy when you're in this phase. We've seen people who, there might be a trend they see over a couple of months, and you kind of jump to that. You consider maybe rebranding your site, we're Penn State's go-to DUI firm. And when we see firms who jump too quickly to focus extensively in one area to the exclusion of maybe some others, it can kind of lead to confusion when potential new clients are visiting the site, and maybe some alienation if they're thinking, oh, this firm seems to really specialize in one area or doesn't provide services and kind of what I'm looking for. We are going to talk about creating multiple websites in just a few minutes. But I just wanted to focus on taking what you've learned and starting to grow your online presence right now. So when you set out to grow your online presence, we advise the vast majority of firms to allocate their efforts in the following ways. Number one, most importantly, is creating a critical mass of substantive content for your website. And what I mean by this is continuously adding practice area pages to your site to achieve a desired site size. Now, a desired site size will depend on a variety of practice areas. Your geographic location, what your competitors are doing, all of those things have to be factored in when you're creating a goal that you want to achieve. So to give an example, a dominating criminal defense law firm in Los Angeles, California, we'll see those sites having sizes 900 pages, 1,100 pages, and then we look at, let's say, a divorce attorney who's dominating the market in a place like Des Moines, Iowa. Those sites might have closer to 100 pages. But we've been conducting market research, and we look at different practice areas, and we look at different geographic areas. We've been doing this for a couple years now. And a constant that we've seen throughout everything has been higher performing sites have the highest volume of pages for that market. So kind of taking a look, seeing what's out there, and then coming up with a goal to work towards should be your first step and should be what you're working towards when you're in the grow phase. And second is blogging. Blogging consistently will definitely benefit your site. We recommend that you blog regularly. But when you're just starting to grow your site, we don't think that blogging needs to be your primary focus. Once you've grown your site to a substantial size, you definitely want to shift over, because blogging is going to give you those little boosts so that your site is remaining updated, it's remaining fresh, and that's going to be great for search engines. But if you're not quite at this place where you want to be size-wise, so let's say you're less than 20 or 25% of your desired site size, you might want to focus on blogging regularly, maybe once a week or 10 times a month or something like this. But once you reach a particular threshold, if you hit that 20 or 25%, you might want to shift over on blogging a little bit more frequently. And of course, depending on the resources, if you have people who are helping you out, if you have a law student, if you have a couple associates and you're both blogging, But you really don't want to focus on more sophisticated blogging techniques until you have built that base of substantive pages. And I do want to caution here that there's no one-size-fits-all strategy for growth. So, for example, if I was giving advice to an immigration attorney right now who is in the growth phase, I would actually say, switch over, focus more of your efforts on blogging right now. We are seeing such incredibly rapid developments in immigration law and policy at all levels of government that the information your client base is going to want to consume, not only your client base, but also people who might be in your professional network, such as LinkedIn, where you're going to be sharing those blogs. They're going to want that up-to-date information, and as an attorney, when you're interpreting, an executive order or, a decision by a court related to that order, when you're writing a blog about it, you're giving your opinion. So you're really giving your expert take on something, and that's not going to be something people are going to be able to find elsewhere. So if there is something unique going on, last summer we saw some decisions that dealt with warrants and breath and blood tests, and that really was an area where we said if you're on DUI, you want to be focusing heavily on blogging for a while. Get this information out, be talking about it, be giving your opinion about it. So keeping your finger on the pulse of your practice area is always something that's very important. So like I said, in general, this is how we advise firms to be growing your online presence, but it's always depends on what's happening in the current environment. And then third, we have sharing your content. So your primary focus should be on content creation, but you also want to get your content out there to the public. And Victoria is going to be speaking about implementing a common sense social media strategy for attorneys later in this webinar, so I'm going to leave those details up to her. And finally, what isn't a primary focus but should be something that's on your radar is your online reputation. In the growth phase, you're going to be reaching out to satisfied clients, seeking reviews for your site, seeking reviews for some third-party sites. And it's a good idea to perform an audit of your firm occasionally, and I don't mean anything super sophisticated, but just kind of put yourself in the shoes of a potential client. What happens when you Google the name of your firm? What happens when you search the name of specific attorneys in search engines? What does your online presence look in general to someone who could be a client? And later in this webinar, Dan is going to go into much greater detail about some specific tools that attorneys can use to manage your online reputation. So for now, I'm going to focus on these first two elements, creating a massive substantive content for your site and blogging. So the first thing I want to focus on when we're talking about creating this critical mass is practice area pages. The fastest way you're going to get to getting that desired site size, achieving that, is creating substantive pages that deal with topics that are directly related to your practice area. When we discussed substantive pages in the start section of the webinar, our main focus was really just getting some stuff up there, create some few broad overview pages that sort of hit on every type of case your firm takes. And what your goal was at this point was to adequately describe, the cases you take, the legal services your firm provides, and you have kind of a general overview of the legal principles that are involved. But when you're in the grow phase, we're going to focus really heavily on fleshing these pages out. Our approach is somewhat akin to the structure of a tree. We're going to be adding branches, and these are going to get smaller and more numerous as we go. So the first step is to make sure we have our really broad categories covered. So we make sure we write a page about each of these, and we generally include these main pages in the navigation, the main menu of your site. And next we start to really break down each page. And we break these down into child pages. So in the example above, we may have a page titled Related Offenses. And we briefly cover the types of crimes that someone who's facing a DUI might also be charged with. And from here, we're going to create child pages for each one of these offenses. And keep in mind, we're not going to replace that original page. We're going to retain it and we're going to keep it there. But we're going to be creating additional pages to nest underneath it. So we're creating a page exclusively for, open container, a page exclusively for eluding the police, for illegal lane change, and so forth. Basically, in creating these nested pages, we want to exhaust all key points about a particular topic, which would warrant independent treatment with a separate page. So we might even have a page that we're kind of putting under related offenses, driving on the suspended license. And that might be something where we add in some grandchild pages and we write pages about specific types of suspensions that one may be driving on. So again, it's fleshing out all the main points until you feel you can no longer write an individual page about that particular topic. And another thing we do in this stage is we're going to get more and more detailed about the types of FAQ pages that we incorporate. At the outset, we generally advise you to have an FAQ page that's kind of a catch-all. So it answers questions potential clients going to have about DWI, the law in general, and then also you can include questions about your firm itself, how quickly you return phone calls, who will they speak to when they contact, that type of thing. But as we're growing, we're going to keep adding FAQ pages, but those are going to become more detailed. So we might have an FAQ page that focuses exclusively on first offense DUI, an FAQ page that focuses exclusively on questions related to your driver's license if you've been charged with DUI, and so on. Another important aspect you're going to want to focus on when you're growing your site are your local pages and your resource pages. Victoria covered local pages in depth in the START series of our webinars, but just to recap, a local page is one that gives your potential clients information that's relevant. So, for example, a page might explain if you're charged with DUI in Forest County, you're going to be arraigned Monday morning in front of Judge Whittinger in courtroom 3A, and if your car has been towed, afterwards you need to visit the clerk's office on the second floor, and the county police contract with these 3 particular tow yards, and they'll walk you through the process for getting your car back, that type of thing. So information that's very unique and it might be difficult for them to find elsewhere online are great things to include in those local pages. And we've seen those types of local pages do really well and be really successful. Resource pages provide information for usually non-legal resources that your clients might be interested in. So these pages would include things like links to local mechanics who install ignition interlock devices, or maybe substance abuse treatment facilities. And having these types of local pages and resource pages serves a number of purposes. You're providing information that's really relevant to potential clients and their families. And you're also adding to the credibility of your site as an authority with the search engines. In addition, it can be a jumping off point for forming connections with local organizations that can help to boost your client base. We've worked with some really successful firms who have pretty close relationships to some of these organizations, and they're really rich referral sources. So they might not, if there's like a substance abuse advocacy organization, not only does the firm have a link to that organization or have a page about it on their site, they might have some staff members who do volunteer work regularly there. So we see these relationships become really symbiotic. The organization becomes familiar with the firm or 1 or 2 of the attorneys, and in the future they refer their members who need legal services there. So as you're growing your site and you're adding the practice area pages, don't forget to provide this type of local information and showcase any relationships that you have with community organizations. And now I want to turn to blogging. So like I said, when you're just starting out, it's important to update your blog, but it shouldn't be the main focus of your content creation. So you're going to want to periodically write blog articles that highlight important developments in your practice area or important developments in current events that are going to be of interest to your audience. And you'll want to come up with a frequency you can maintain this at this point. Like I said, be it once or twice a month or once or twice a week, 10 times a month, something like that. And then once you've reached, the designated point in the build of your evergreen pages, you can shift to a more kind of sophisticated blogging strategy. And what I mean by this is, taking some time to predict or analyze, the topics that you should be writing about and when you want to be writing about those topics. So one of the things we recommend is creating some blog series. And that's where you're covering related information over a number of posts that span, maybe a few weeks or a few months. And, you can do this at a strategic time when information has the best chance to reach your audience. So if you're talking about, a lot of times we see this with DUI firms around the holidays because we tend to see spikes in those arrests following particular holidays. And if you're with us in our Start series, I mentioned an additional tool that you can use, which is Google Trends. So with Google Trends, you can view how users are seeking information over time in a particular region. So here we see data on the popularity of the search term ignition interlock in Phoenix, Arizona. So if we look at the 5-year history of users seeking out information related to this term, we actually see that there's a spike of popularity in the summer in this particular region. So if you're doing a series that focuses on, how an ignition interlock device works, where you can get one in the local area, it might be a really good idea to plan that out in advance and have that be published during the summer because you have an idea that this is when those folks that you're trying to target are going to be looking for this specific information. So we've seen a lot of firms be very successful in this phase when they're growing their DUI practice, when they're really taking off. But we've seen some hit some stumbling blocks. And I wanted to take a moment here to discuss some mistakes we've seen in this phase when you're trying to grow your online presence. And the first is a disorganized approach. This is something we commonly encounter with firms where you have more than one person writing for the site, although a disorganization can happen with a solo practitioner as well. And I mentioned this in our Start series, but with multiple authors, it is very critical that you establish guidelines early on as far as how you want to come across to your audience. So guidelines for tone and voice and the structure of the pages on your site. Sometimes when this step is skipped, we end up seeing kind of like a hodgepodge of pages on a site, and some of them don't even look like they should be on the same website. On one page, an author might take maybe more of a scare tactic approach, talking about a DUI can impact your employment, it can ruin your life, and then on another page, it's a totally different, very caring, we will be with you every step of the way, you don't need to be worried about this, we're there with you, we'll be sitting next to you, that type of thing. And we even see sometimes calls to action phrased differently when you have different authors. And that can be very confusing, if you have, let's say, one person who's writing, we're your Pittsburgh DUI attorneys. And then you have another author who's writing things like, we serve all of Western Pennsylvania from Erie to Slippery Rock to Pittsburgh. So that might be a little confusing to a client who's going through the pages of the site and they're not quite sure. Or, they come into one page that only says one particular city and they think, okay, I'm excluded from this region. I want somebody who specializes, who covers me too. I don't want kind of an out-of-towner. And then closely related to this is kind of like a lack of strategy. And that can happen even when we just see one author. So say you're not sure when you're going to have time to write for your site, and every now and again you have that free hour, so you just sit down and you just sort of pick a topic at random and you bang out a page. So you will be adding to the overall volume and authority of your site, but you're really missing out on an opportunity to concentrate your efforts strategically. So giving yourself a boost in an area where you think you can get the most business or where you think you have the most potential for growth. When you don't take the time to plan ahead and you just kind of take an approach, just more of a throw some mud at the wall and see what sticks approach, you're kind of missing an opportunity there. And then the next thing I want to talk about is working with SEO companies. And we've seen firms working with so many different SEO companies, and we've seen results that range from beneficial to truly disastrous, I'd say. And I'm really not being hyperbolic when I say this. SEO companies are everywhere. I'm sure you're well aware of this. They really seem to kind of love nothing more than inundating attorneys with really scary sounding reports about their website performance. However, I think it's really, really important to be aware of the fact that there is no regulatory body that governs SEO companies. We had to take the MPRE. We had our character and our fitness examined before we were admitted to be able to practice law. And then we have, we have a governing body that kind of examines our behavior as we go. And the reason why those rules are established and why we have these state governing bodies is to keep the best interests of our clients protected, and to make sure that we're always working for the best interests of our clients. However, there's no analogous body that governs SEO companies. There's nothing that's keeping your best interests protected when you're working with an SEO company. And the reason why that can be really, really dangerous is the vast, vast majority of SEO companies aren't aware of what I would call the true perils of online legal marketing. So you might see some that say that they specialize, in working with lawyers, working with attorneys, although a lot of times dig a little deeper and, the same company specializes working with doctors, or vets, plumbers, garage door companies, so on and so forth. And like I said, not knowing the perils of online legal marketing can lead to SEO companies making really, really serious ethical mistakes in the name of a firm, in the name of a particular attorney. These come in a range. We've really seen a range of things. Sometimes, SEO company might hurt you by filling your site with keyword-stuffed content. And your URL, it's going to take a hit. It's going to take a hit with a search engine. And it might take you, months of adding good organic content for your URL to be able to recover from that. But we've also seen some much more serious infractions. SEO companies, like I said, a lot of times are very ignorant of the ethical rules that attorneys must operate under. So we've seen them do things such as write content for site that violates professional rules. They call firms an expert in a particular type of law. They say they're certified in a particular type of law. They label an attorney as the best in a particular type of practice area. The image in this slide right here to the right, this is a modified version of an actual screenshot we took. We discovered that SEO companies were creating fake attorney blogs. They were pulling Shutterstock images and then creating fake names and fake attorney personas to promote the content of particular firms, the firms that they were working for. And when you look at the professional rules and the state that this happened, the professional rules specifically prohibit any advertising with individuals who are purporting to be attorneys who haven't been admitted to practice law. So again, if you're not in control and you're not aware of what these companies are doing on your behalf, you could really be putting your license at risk. You could be putting, your firm at risk. You could be putting your URL at risk. So whether you choose to not work with an SEO company, you do it yourself, or you do choose to work with an SEO company, we just really recommend that you be as judicious as possible, and try to, if the company has experience working with attorneys in the past, do your research, see what's going on, see how much they know. When you're talking to them, do they sound like are they aware of the ethical implications? If so, are they aware of the ethical implications by state? If you work in a tri-state area, and one state requires you to use, a disclosure on the end of every page, are they aware of that? And if you have any concerns, definitely, put the brakes on that. It's something that it's totally not worth the risk at all. And next, multiple websites. There might be a time when maintaining multiple websites actually is a good idea. But what we see happen sometimes is firms who kind of think, well, if I saturate the market, in a particular geographic area with sites for my firm, I'm going to gain an advantage. But what happens is if the site is focusing on the same geographic area and kind of promoting the same services by the same, firm, what that does is the pages are competing with each other, and you're not getting an advantage. The pages are going to push each other down. And then finally, having unrealistic expectations. As I mentioned earlier, top criminal defense firm in Los Angeles, you're going to see pages closer to 1,000. You're going to have websites that have 1,000 pages that are really dominating the search engines. Again, like I said, you're looking at, Cranberry, Pennsylvania. Pages might be much, 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 much lower. They're definitely going to be much lower for someone who's still dominating that area. But if you think, okay, I can walk into, this major metro and I'm going to dominate organically, I'm going to 25, 50 pages, you're going to be in for a rude awakening. But what we see is attorneys who have unrealistic expectations, and what happens is they become prime prey to falling into the trap of just changing marketing strategies all too often. And they don't take the time to commit to a content strategy long enough to really let it work. And Dan is going to talk in a little bit about why consistency in your marketing strategy is really critical and is very important. So next, I want to turn to some lessons we've learned from firms who are doing really well, who've grown their site and are seeing serious gains in their business, in their the amount of cases and their revenue. Any time we see this, we try to learn as much as we can from these clients. We try to really examine what are they doing, how can we synthesize this. When we're advising other people, we want to learn from the best. And so some of the things we've seen that these firms do, where they're working with our content team or they're writing on their own, they have a really organized, strategic approach to add content to their site. They know what they want to target first. They might say, we've seen, in our area, we just legalized the use of recreational marijuana. We know we're going to see a huge spike in these types of DUIs. We want to go hard on that. And then we kind of want to transfer over to, this type of case. They have just that strategy. They know what they want to hit. They have their finger on the pulse, and they plan it out. They know who's going to write what. They know when things are going to be written. They know when things are going to be published. They know to spread that content out so that the site is getting a consistent boost of new content. And they also plan for eventualities. They know when they have a bunch of cases coming up, or maybe a big hearing, and they know if they're going to be too busy and they can't write, and they make a plan for that, who's going to step in, that type of thing. Like I said, it's strategic and it's very organized. And then, I know I have this on the other slide, but I'm going to talk about multiple sites again. When it's used appropriately, it can be very effective. Like I said, don't want sites that are competing against each other. But if you have a particular element or some part of your firm that you'd really like to highlight, thing that you think is unique, something that you're really going to go after, having a multiple site can be an effective way to achieve this. So let's say you're located near a really big military base, and you have an associate who's served. You have an associate, and she's a veteran, and you're seeing a good deal of traction, cases where you're having off-base DUIs. This might be a time where you'll open a second site, and you're specifically highlighting this one attorney. You can put a special focus on her and her background, her experience in the military, and how she understands the challenges and the potential outcomes to your rank, if you were to get a civilian conviction. So in this case, what you're doing is you don't want to alienate your potential civilian clients. You want to offer DUI representation to anyone, but you have a way that you can sort of target a good portion of your local population, so servicemen and women. And you're doing so strategically so that with having two different sites, you're highlighting, you have this unique asset, which would be, a veteran attorney who kind of understands what it's like being in those shoes more than someone who hasn't served would be able to do. And by having multiple sites, you're doing that, you're highlighting that, and you're going to have a better chance at capturing that large chunk of your potential client base without merely just competing against yourself. And then having realistic expectations. And what I mean by this is basically the inverse of what I just spoke about earlier with those unrealistic expectations. Firms who know organic content marketing works, but that it requires a specific amount of time, and an amount of effort, and they really stick with it, and they tend to see much more long-term success than people who are kind of changing their marketing tactics every 6 months or getting really frustrated in a short amount of time and abandoning, what they're doing to try to go on to the next shiny thing. And then finally, they identify and capitalize upon their unique selling proposition. And we have seen so many different things as far as what really hits home with your local market. This might be something you know from the start, or it might be something that really evolves over time. And again, like I said, we work with so many different firms, from really rural areas to major metro areas and a variety of different practice areas. And the types of things that strike a chord, it can really be anything. It might be the logo you choose. It might be your tagline. It might be, you're the only firm that wrote a specific page that talks about how you can't park at the courthouse on a Tuesday because they're going to be doing jury selection, but you can park in this other area for free or something like that, some information you can't get anywhere else. It might be, kind of a promotional online video that you had a summer law extern create that just really caught on. Always kind of having your finger on the pulse of what is resonating and being able to really capitalize upon that is definitely key to growing your online presence. So if you have any specific questions, regarding content for your site, I really encourage you to reach out to us. You can shoot us an email at writing@lawlytics.com or just give us a call. You might already be familiar with her, but for those of you who aren't, Alyssa Rhodes is the director of our content services. And over the past couple years, she's helped many, many clients create content and do long-term builds. So if you have a brief question, you want some additional resources, or you're interested in planning for the long term, just drop us a line and we're always more than happy to talk with you and answer any questions you might have. And then finally, I just wanted to talk about the next webinar we're going to be doing in this practice area series. And that's going to be our Dominate series, and our DUI session will air on March 7th, and then it's available on demand after the original air date. So in this webinar, we're going to be discussing adding various types of downloadable collateral to your site, expanding the scope of your practice, and examining some lessons we've learned from dominant firms. So if you're interested in that, I really recommend joining us or checking that out when it's available on demand thereafter. And now I'm going to turn the mic over to Sophia, who's going to walk you through some critical design concepts for growing your practice.
Thank you. So in the first part of this series, I discussed the various basic elements that make for a strong law firm website and what can distract from the user experience and keep potential clients from contacting your firm. In the second part of this series, I'm going to dig deeper into the elements of design that can have a psychological effect on your potential clients and encourage them to engage with you. We'll discuss topics like choosing colors, what they can mean and what they can say about your law firm, the various shapes of logos, and how that can affect your potential client's perception of your law firm. I'll make the case for the importance of having responsive websites, and I'll also discuss examples of how to make the content on your site more readable, which can increase client engagement. If you've missed the first half of our Start, Grow, Dominate series, feel free to visit the LawLytics website and check out my design tips from part 1 on our webinar page. So, in the first part of our series, we discussed what makes a good logo. Now we're going to dig a little deeper to discuss the psychology of shapes. So let's talk first about circles, ovals, and ellipses. These shapes tend to project a positive emotional message, and as a result, they're one of the most commonly used graphic shapes. Nature holds some of the first sets of circles that a person sees, like the sun, the moon, stars, the earth, and some fruits, and the iris of a human's eye. Circular logos can suggest defense, endurance, community, friendship, safety, love, and relationships. Circles have no beginning or end, which suggests things like energy and power. Circles have an implication of marriage or partnership, suggesting stability and endurance. Many companies that have a global presence, unparalleled products and services that value community and contributions, or have been around to stand the test of time, use circular logos. Some examples of circular logos would include ABC, Target, Starbucks, and NASA. Now let's talk about squares. Squares and rectangles suggest stability, but can also be used to imply balance. The straight lines and precision of squares and rectangles are suggestive of organization, strength, intellect, structure, and efficiency. Squares are most likely found in man-made structures, and as a result, they have become familiar shapes that we trust. For example, items of furniture like chairs and tables are often squares or rectangles. It should be noted that when combined with colors like blue and gray, squares and rectangles can appear cold and uninviting, and we'll talk more about colors later. But a good way to counteract that is to position a square or a rectangle in an unconventional way or to add some dynamic colors. When you do this, you can create something more interesting than just a basic square. Companies that want to inspire trust, stability, strength often have square-shaped logos. So now we're going to discuss triangles. Triangles are sometimes associated with power, science, religion, and law. Triangles can be positioned upright on their sides, and that position can create different meanings. When sitting on their base, triangles can be perceived to promote stability. On their side, triangles can suggest energy, purpose, and progression. A triangle on the side can also represent direction, movement, or speed, kind of like an arrow. So examples of logos that feature triangles will include Delta, Mitsubishi, and Google Play. Well, actually, a lot of Google products have a triangle shape. So we've talked about some basic shapes, but what about lines? Our subconscious minds may associate vertical lines and shapes with strength and aggression, courage and boldness. The precision of vertical lines can also suggest professionalism. Horizontal lines and shapes, on the other hand, can suggest community, tranquility, calm, and peace. Jagged, sharp angles may appear as aggressive or dynamic. They are associated with violence, action, and speed. And on the other hand, soft, rounded letters give a youthful appeal. Curved shapes can suggest jagged and sharp angles may appear as aggressive or dynamic. They are associated with violence, action, and speed. On the other hand, soft, rounded letters give a youthful appeal. Curved shapes can suggest motion, femininity, happiness, rhythm, pleasure, and generosity. So now we will kind of dive deep into the psychology of colors. Now that we've talked about the logo shapes, we can suggest what the colors can bring to those shapes. So just creating a logo isn't enough. It's important to think about the colors that are incorporated into the logo and elsewhere on your website. Think about a logo that's familiar to people all around the world. The McDonald's logo. You immediately think about the golden arches. However, you might also think about McDonald's if you saw colors like red or yellow together, or the purple and the orange of the FedEx logo, or the pink and the orange of Dunkin' Donuts box. These are some brands that are recognizable by their colors alone, and those are just a few. So let's move ahead and talk about individual colors and the psychological effect that they can have on potential clients. So let's talk about red first. Red quickly catches people's attention. One likely reason is that it's used for things like stop signs or, street lights. The most popular sentiment linked to red is love, but it also signifies passion and energy. The sight of this color and its alternative shades make people feel alive. It can heighten hunger and be inviting at the same time. Therefore, it's often used for food establishments such as restaurants and diners. Red can also symbolize power, which is why it's a common color for both fictitious heroes and villains, like Superman. Other meanings and symbolisms for red include ambition, aggression, power, success, as well as strength, victory, and warmth. If you're thinking about alternatives to red, try carmine or crimson or ruby or even scarlet. These are, of course, brands that we think of when we think about the color red. So we think of Coca-Cola, Virgin, Target, and these are just some examples. Next, we'll talk about orange. So orange is a color that's easily liked by children because of its warmth. Since it has a fruit nickname, it's often associated with food and beverages. Orange also symbolizes luxury and playfulness. Orange isn't as aggressive as red, but it can have the same stimulating effect on the human brain. So orange can symbolize endurance, action, assurance, change, communication, creativity, enthusiasm, health, security, and wisdom, among a lot of other things. Alternatives to orange would be apricot or carrot, peach, or even tangerine. Brands popularized by this color would be Nickelodeon, Fanta, Blogger, and Golf. Now, yellow is believed to be the color of hope, and it's also associated with optimism and youthfulness. Since many of us were taught that this is the color of the sun, humans often associate it with bright days, which may help us feel happiness. It may be It may not be a coincidence that highlighters, pens, pencils, and legal pads are yellow, because yellow is considered to improve memory and focus. So yellow can also represent forgiveness, joy, intelligence, youth, and knowledge. If you're thinking about using yellow in a logo, you can also consider some alternative to true yellow, such as like a goldenrod or a lemon and mustard. Brands that are popularized by this color would be Crayola, McDonald's, National Geographic, Post-it, and Subway. So green. Green is widely identified as the color of life by many people. Green is sometimes favored by those who want to inspire health and growth in the environment. Green, of course, is also the color of American money, and therefore it may be associated with wealth, especially when it's partnered with colors like gold. Green is also associated with concepts like adventure, calmness, cleanness, efficiency, freedom, generosity, growth, health, hope, progress, safety, and sympathy. Alternatives to green will include asparagus, forest green, lime green, sea green, and olive green. Brands that use the color will be Animal Planet, Android, Heineken, Land Rover, and Starbucks. So blue is a popular color in general, but blue is also sometimes even as popular choice, is the most popular choice for social networking sites. So Facebook being a prime example of this. This is because blue can signify relaxation and communication, effects that are sometimes achieved when you use these through socializing online. It is also a color associated with trust, and it encourages people to share virtually everything in their social media accounts. Since seas and clear skies are often blue, the color is easily related to rest, making it an easy choice for those who wish to invoke, loosening up. Blue can represent acceptance, loyalty, honesty, dignity, and reliability, among other words. Alternatives to blue would be cerulean or, teal. Brands that are popularized by the color would be Dell, Facebook, Intel, and Tumblr, and Twitter. Violet often reflects luxury. Many products choose violet to indicate lavishness. However, too much can come off as tacky, so exercise some restraints when it comes to using this color. Purple can also be associated with intelligence, independence, and mystery. Since not many natural things are of this color, it communicates excitement. Violet can represent things like intelligence and independence, as well as value, wisdom, and justice. Alternatives would be amethyst, lavender, lilac, plum, and purple. Now, brands that are popularized by this color will be Hallmark, Crown Royal, Welch's, and Yahoo. Now, brown is the color of the earth, which signifies reliability, stability, and humility. Brown is considered as natural as green, which makes sense. They're often seen together in many living things, such as plants and trees. But brown signifies, prudence. Brown isn't flashy or attention-grabbing, but it doesn't need to be. It's a color that feels grounded. It can represent things like steadfast, simplicity, friendliness, dependability, and health. Alternatives to brown would be bronze or chestnut, mahogany. Brands that are popularized by this color will be Coffee Bean, Tea Leaf, Louis Vuitton, and UPS. So now that we've talked about the differences, all the different colors, and the different meanings behind these colors, I hope that you will take this opportunity to think about your brand. And if you're thinking about rebranding, just ask yourself what shape would best represent your brand and what color would bring about the meanings and the terms that you want associated to your brand. Now we will discuss responsive designs. So if you spent some time thinking about your online legal marketing, you may have heard the terms responsive design come up now and again. So what exactly is responsive website? A responsive website, much like it sounds, is a site that responds or changes based on the device that is being used by your potential clients. For example, if your law firm's website were to have 3-column layout on a desktop or a laptop, viewing experience. On a tablet or a mobile device, it might change to a single column display. Responsive design may also hide things like unnecessary images so they don't interfere or compete with the more important information when the site is being viewed from a mobile device. Responsive sites not only have dynamic content that changes based on the screen size and condensed navigation, it also features optimized images and correct padding and spacing. If you're wondering whether your current website is responsive, and yes, if you're a LawLytics member, your site is responsive, here's a good way to check. If you're on the computer and you can tell if a site is responsive by reducing your browser's window size from full screen down to like the smallest size possible. If the appearance of the text, images, and menu change to accommodate the smaller window, then the site is most likely responsive. So what's the difference between a responsive website and a mobile-friendly website? One way to think about this is to remember that responsive website is mobile-friendly, but not all mobile-friendly websites are responsive. So here's why. While a responsive website is one that was originally designed to accommodate a variety of screen sizes and devices, a mobile-friendly website is one that is designed to work the exact same way across devices. This means that nothing about the site changes whether you use it on a desktop, laptop, tablet, or smartphone. Features like navigation drop-downs are limited as they can be difficult to use on mobile, and no flash animation is used. The website is literally the same across the board with no usability concerns regardless of the device on which it's being viewed. So it's usable, yes. Does it take usability into account? No, not that much. Because a mobile-friendly site is the same across all devices, it's a site that's usable for a mobile device or tablet. However, it is not optimal. Users may have to enlarge text to read it, they might have to struggle to click the links, and they might have a hard time using the drop-down menus and become frustrated because it wasn't optimized for their device. It's an important thing to distinguish between. There's a Google tool that will tell you whether your site is mobile friendly, but that's from a computer's perspective. If your site is mobile friendly but not responsive, you may find frustrated users. And it's best to basically make sure that your site is optimized for mobile devices, because mobile devices are what users are using now to go onto your websites more often than desktop. Next, we will discuss slimming down your defense website. As I mentioned in the first part of this series, there are some attorneys who really want to add every bell and whistle to their websites. And I understand why that's appealing, but there are some features that just look really exciting and interesting, or maybe you've seen a competitor who has something similar. But the bells and whistles create some real problems, not only from a design standpoint, but also from your potential client standpoint. In this next section, we're going to talk about slimming and refining what's on your website to give your users an optimal experience that encourages them to engage with your content and to contact your firm. So a lot of the bells and whistles that attorneys want to put on their law firm's websites have a couple problems. They don't serve any real purpose for the potential client. They may confuse the client by creating a lack of direction, and they can weigh down your site because they tend to be rather heavy elements. When you're thinking about your web design, keep this in mind. Everything you put on your website has to have a function or a purpose. Be selective about the things that you put on your website. You may want to do an audit of your current site and ask yourself, what value does this element add to my visitor's experience? What benefit does it offer them? If the answer is nothing, then don't use it. There's a lot of debate among web developers about the use of sliders. Sliding images on your homepage can help you communicate several important messages in the same space. The problem is that most visitors don't wait around for the third or fourth slide. They start scrolling, and then the sliding images just becomes a distraction at that point. One thing we sometimes notice is that attorneys often ask if they should have sliders on their websites or if they should have like 4, 5, 6 sliders. They may have seen sliders on another website and they really like the style and they wanted to use it for their site too. But just like the answer to the question as to whether an attorney should have multiple websites, the answer to whether or not you should have sliders on your law firm website is it depends. Here's what it depends on. If you don't have a lot of content on your law firm's website, a slider can act like an unnecessary element. It can distract your potential clients from what you want them to read or where you want them to go. There's not enough content there. Sliders can even bore your potential clients. However, if you have a lot of strong content that you want to drive traffic to, a slider can be a very good choice. A combination of strong imagery that supports and strengthens your message alongside some high-quality content can keep your potential clients engaged. And if the content is strong and interesting, that can be enough to keep them focused on the slider. But the bottom line is that you can't have a slider for the sake of just having a slider. And you shouldn't use images for the sake of just using images if they say nothing about you, your firm, or your areas of practice, or what kind of service you can provide your potential clients. Be strategic about what you do and what you choose to put on your site. So now we're going to talk about increasing readability. So readability is an important part of your site refinement. It's something I discussed a little bit during the first part of this series, but I bring it up again because it's a valuable thing for attorneys to understand. Here are some elements that increase the readability of your website's content. First, choose your fonts wisely. Use a limited number of typefaces and be selective about your choices. Serif fonts, like what you see in this poster on the upper left, have like little feet. They have these little anchors at the top and at the bottom of the fonts. They have it on each letter, and they're considered to be more traditional and serious. Example of serif fonts would include like Times Roman or Rockwell and Baskerville. There are also sans serif fonts to consider. These are missing the little feet. So you see in the fonts, they're often viewed as more modern. These fonts, which would include like Helvetica, Century Gothic, may be easier to read on the web. They're usually web-safe fonts, so Open Sans, it would be considered a sans serif font, and they're just they're easier on the eye. They're easier to read, and they're better for body content. So your headlines you could probably do in a serif font, but the main meat on your site should be a sans serif font. So there are a lot of scripts and displays fonts. These are often they often look very interesting, but they can be challenging to read and may give the wrong sort of impression about your firm. For that reason, we recommend to use fonts to use those kind of fonts kind of sparingly or not at all. Display fonts, I'm not a fan. So what about font size and spacing? There are also features that can make a difference in readability. Designers design for a wide range of devices and screen resolution. While a fixed font size defined in pixels might look great on a big desktop screen, it may be oversized for a mobile phone. So people prefer a different font size depending on things like their age, their eyesight, and personal preferences. So just take that into consider when you think about your target audience. What is the age group of the average person coming to your site? If you're dealing with like a lot of younger, like a younger demographic, then you can use smaller fonts. But if your demographic is that of an older age, then you do have to consider using larger fonts because it will be easier on their eyes. Another thing to take into consideration is high contrast colors are important. The more contrast you have, the better the readability. So color combinations like blue on red or white on yellow can be distracting. It can be like a disaster for reading. Whether it's just that it becomes tiring to the eye to read or impossible to read at all, you have to take these things into consideration. So people can scan text for the information that they need, which is why shorter lines and paragraphs can help them find that information. It's also helpful to break up lines and paragraphs with headers when appropriate, and not only sticking to large and bolded text, which I find a lot of attorneys do. Bolding everything and highlighting everything will not make it readable. It makes it harder for people to read what's there. Using all caps on everything also is very hard to read. So remember to chunk your content, meaning to separate it into little groups, little bite-sized groups with a headline, maybe some bullet points to highlight different bits of information, and the occasional bold for something that is really important that you want them to absolutely not miss. But don't make every other word bold, and don't write long chunks of content because it becomes tiring to the user to read that. Next, we will talk about the role of site speed. Site speed is one of those things that attorneys sometimes obsess over without fully understanding it and its role in your website presence. Is site speed important to your online presence? Yes. A site that takes too long to load will frustrate your potential clients, and they'll go elsewhere to find the answers to their questions. And we know that Google is concerned about user experience, and part of that experience is whether the page information loads quickly enough for someone who finds it. So search engines also need to crawl and digest information on websites quickly. The slow sites are basically, they slow down your process. But in the grand scheme of things, site speed is only one of the hundreds of signals that Google uses to determine rank and relevance. But the real issue here is that a slow site can frustrate an otherwise enthusiastic potential client who by being frustrated is likely to leave your site and go elsewhere, maybe even a competitor's website, and hire them instead of you. And that's why it's valuable to remove any unnecessary heavy elements that can cause your site to be slowed down or to load more slowly. There are attorneys who are concerned when they have a site that doesn't measure to 100 out of 100 for site speed. So let me explain why a perfect site speed score doesn't always translate to a good website. First, if I create a website that is simply a blank page, that site might actually score perfectly according to Site Speed Calculator. The problem is that the site has nothing on it. And as soon as you begin adding things to the website, the site speed will likely will decrease a little. But if you add a lot of unnecessary heavy elements, then you'll really see a decrease in your site speed. So at the far end of the spectrum, you've got a blank page, which would rank fabulous in site speed, and on the other hand, you've got this page with all the bells and whistles, you have videos, you have graphics, you have things sliding from the left into the right, and that's going to rank very poorly because it's going to be a slow site. So the deal here is balance. Having all of the necessary elements that drive traffic and engagement and lighting and everything, the bells and whistles that can be distracting can basically distract from your overall presence, and it will slow down your site. So just think again about what is more important, the message that you're trying to convey to your potential clients, and how to do that in a visual way that is both appealing but will not be too heavy and will not slow down your site. Next, we're going to discuss social media. So your law firm's social media presence can affect how your brand performs if it's not consistent with the rest of your online presence. And the goal here is to drive up conversions and to have more people contact your law firm. The look of your brand is determined by your look, your logo, your layout, colors, and all other design elements. The visual identity of your brand can be affected by how these elements work. When it's done right, your DUI defense firm can create a visually stunning page which reflects your brand's personality and message effectively. Some general guidelines to keep in mind when it comes to visual branding is 1. Keep colors, logos, and layouts similar across all platforms. Again, people expect consistency and something that they recognize. So if you are using blue and gray with a round logo on your website, then those same colors and that round logo should also appear on your Facebook, your LinkedIn, your Twitter, your Google+, YouTube pages, and any other networks that promotes your law firm. Remember to pay close attention to the color palette, your fonts, and other graphical elements. So once again, if the normal logo that you use is a curvy font like Instagram does, or like any of these like little fonts, you want to keep that font consistent on every platform. Don't use like a curly font here, a bold chunky font here, Times Roman here. It will confuse people about your brand. Your official website, email, newsletter, and business cards should have a similar design to what you represent on your social media platforms. This is the value of starting off with good branding, a good color scheme, and a good and very versatile logo. That makes doing these things a whole lot easier. Use similar tone and language in your content. So if on one platform you come off as sweet and we are always on your side and we will help you through anything, and in the next one you're aggressive, and it will kind of confuse your users. Keep your message content consistent. Rachel talked about this a little bit in the first part of the series, but conflicting messaging or conflicting tone can confuse your potential clients and may harm your brand. So it's important to keep your content consistent, whether it's on your if it's on your substantive pages of your website, on your blog posts, on your social media updates. Just like it can be problematic to have abandoned your blog or your website or your social media, on the other end of it, it's bombarding your audience with content, especially if it's the same again and again. Keep the pace a bit varied. Twitter users and Facebook users may expect very different posting frequencies from businesses. As I mentioned in the first part of the series, people don't like being consistently advertised to. So talking the call my law firm now approach can turn people away from doing just that. Use your social media as a tool to promote content that gives your potential clients something to think about. Surprise them with facts that they didn't know. Give them valuable information that they can use. Think about creating infographics that are highly shareable. When you do that, you're much more likely to see content shared by others, which again helps to drive traffic back to your site. And now that I've finished talking about social media from a design perspective, Victoria is going to tell you a little bit more about social media from a strategic standpoint.
Thanks, Sophia. So for those of you who aren't familiar with me, my name is Victoria Bluten. I'm the community manager here at LawLytics, and my job is to keep attorneys on the cutting edge of web technologies and online legal marketing, and to help you learn what works on the web. So if you joined us for the first part in this series, welcome back. If you didn't, let me recap what we discussed there. We talked about what SEO is and how search engines work. We talked about how to understand how your potential clients use the internet, common myths about SEO and online legal marketing, and we also introduced topics like blogging and substantive content. And of course, if you are interested in that webinar and you didn't get to see it, it aired last week and it's now available to view on demand over at the LawLytics website. So here is what we'll be discussing today in terms of web strategy, social media. Some of you may be asking why the topic of social media wasn't introduced in the first part of this three-part series, and there was a very specific reason for that. At LawLytics, we see it that social media is really a supplementary aspect of your law firm's web presence. And so often we see attorneys obsessing over it or spending time signing up for every social media platform there is, or accidentally using it in ways that may undermine the work that they're doing elsewhere on the web. So we're talking about it now. And the reason for that is, if you're joining us for this webinar, it should be at the point at which you've really got the foundation of your law firm's website in place in terms of developing and publishing content on a regular basis. So, if social media is a supplement to your law firm's web presence, why do you need it? That's something we're going to discuss in just a moment, as well as discussing which social media sites are most beneficial for attorneys, because not all of them confer the same advantage, or in some cases any real advantage. We're also going to talk about using social media effectively. And once you understand what social media is meant to do in terms of your web presence, this is going to make a lot of sense to you. So, why do DUI attorneys need social media? Social media presence can be valuable for law firms in general. There was a piece that came out in Forbes not too long ago that suggests that employers may be suspicious of those who don't have social media like Facebook just because of the normalization of a social media presence. Now, as that applies to your law firm, because of the ubiquity of social media and how often we use it, people may feel suspicious or sometimes just frustrated with you if you don't have a social media presence. We are in an age when so many things revolve around the internet, and that's regardless of what device we're consuming content from. So tech abandonment can raise some red flags for potential clients. They expect to find you in the places that they're looking, whether that is on search engines or on social media. Your clients just want to be able to find you, and that's regardless of where that is. They might want to interact with you in a discussion on Facebook. Maybe they want to recommend you to somebody else on Twitter. One of the best ways also to promote the content on your law firm's website is through social media. So when you're done writing a piece, you can let your followers on social media know that it's there. This is a good way to drive traffic back to your law firm's website. While some of your potential clients may find you through the search engines, promoting your work on social media helps your work get some additional exposure, also in a way that's very easily shareable with others. So, which social media do you need? Before I get into anything specific, I think it's important for attorneys to exercise some discretion when they're choosing their social media. It isn't a good use of your time or your effort to indiscriminately fill out profiles on every single social media site that there is. Just in the same way that there are tons of online directories that attorneys can choose from, doesn't mean that you should fill out every profile that you can. For example, something like Avvo may be much more useful than some other directories, and you want to pick something that's useful for both you and your potential clients. Same goes for social media. You don't want to choose just any social medium, or in the reverse of that, choose all of them or choose ones that aren't particularly useful. You want to choose the ones where you'll expect to find your potential clients and where they expect to find you. Now, if you do take the other route of indiscriminately choosing social media, what tends to happen is that you'll likely spread your messaging way too thin and ultimately dilute your message to your potential clients. And that's why it's a much better choice to select the right ones, the essential ones, than it is to put yourself out there and hope for the best. If you've been joining us on our webinars for a while, this message shouldn't be too surprising to you. We are very much advocates of strategy and strategic thinking when it comes to any aspect of your law firm's web presence, because that's how you avoid wasting time and wasting money on strategies that you may only later discover don't work. So in sum, there are a ton of social media sites out there, and it's about striking the balance between having absolutely no web presence, which can be a turnoff for potential clients, and on the other hand, being present everywhere from Facebook to Snapchat to Instagram, because that strategy isn't a good use of your time and your energy, and it's one that is unlikely to produce the kind of results that you're looking for as a DUI defense attorney. There are just some platforms that are more useful than others for lawyers. So let's talk about the big three that we think are a good place to start. So first, no surprise that Facebook makes the list. Facebook, of course, boasts about 1 billion users and is such an ingrained part of our existence now that, much like Google, there are people who use Facebook as a verb. Social media is really an increasingly normal part of our lives, and so much so that we want other aspects of our web activity to be combined with it, and that's really become evident in that while some people, myself included, still go to online news aggregates to find out what's happening in the world, a lot of people just use their Facebook. Facebook's approach to the news may reveal something about this. So 66% of American adults use Facebook. 41% of those get their news from the social media site. And that's regardless of gender, race, age, or education level. More people are getting their news from social media than ever before, and yet when these people are polled, these people say that they don't consider Facebook to be a quote-unquote important news source. So interestingly, it appears that Facebook users aren't actively seeking out the news. Of those who read news on Facebook, about 1/5 of them say that they think of Facebook as a useful place to get news, and 78% that they say that they stumble upon the news while using Facebook for non-news related reasons. There was one participant in this particular Pew Research study who said, "I believe Facebook is a good way to find out news without actually looking for it." Now, this is a good opportunity for you to capitalize on this by sharing information through this particular medium. There may be a question for some of you, which is, do I need a Facebook business page or do I need a personal page? And the answer to that can be both. There are drawbacks and benefits to each. For example, if you use a business page, you can reach people outside of your basic friend circle. Drawback to that is, to do that, you may have to spend money for promoting posts, and this may or may not be a good use of your advertising budget. It just depends. This is something that Dan's going to touch on later, and that he'll talk about during our upcoming webinar on pay-per-click marketing that is tomorrow, February 8th. Twitter, of course, makes the list too. Here is what makes Twitter so great. So not only are you limited to those 140 characters, but the brevity of those posts are often what makes them so popular. People don't like sifting through tons of information to get what they want to read. And not only that, but people tend to love little nuggets of information. And with Twitter, by virtue of the fact that your post length is limited, you've got to get right to the point. Twitter is a great way to reach potential clients and also for referral sources. For example, if someone posts a relevant question, somebody else may tag you in that and say, hey, get in touch with this DUI attorney. Really, it can be that easy in a lot of cases. Here is what I find most interesting about Twitter, and I wrote a blog post about this a little while back, so I don't know how many of my listeners are basketball fans, but if you've been keeping up with the news, you'll know that basketball star Stephen Curry is getting his own social media platform. Apparently some stars shine so bright that they really just need their own, but that's not the most interesting part about this. It's about how he got there. Stephen Curry had an okay Twitter following, but when he faced an injury that kept him off the court, what he did was that he started interacting quite heavily with his Twitter followers. The result of that was that he ended up amassing this extraordinary number of followers, about 4.5 million, and there are now so many that he was struggling to keep up with them, and thus the need for his own social media platform to sift through all those tweets. But the lesson for attorneys here in the value of social media is that Twitter is particularly good for this, to have often real-time discussions with your potential clients and referral sources. As I said in the first part of this series, there is that expression that says that people won't care about what you know until they know how much you care. And again, this is a great place to exercise that philosophy. In a moment, we'll talk a little bit more about having discussions on the web too, but I want to move on to LinkedIn here. LinkedIn is maybe a little bit different from these first two in that it can be quite valuable for you as an attorney, but in a different way from Facebook and Twitter. LinkedIn is valuable particularly for peer-to-peer referrals and networking. It's a great place to showcase your online resume, and sharing information there can really bolster your thought leadership. You can publish blog posts to LinkedIn as well, and that's outside of publishing links to your pieces that are on your law firm's website and driving traffic back there. And this can be a nice way to link back to many other pieces on your site if you're going to write something as a blog post on LinkedIn. But I advise you that if you're going to do that, make sure that you really have that solid content foundation on your own site first before you start contributing to LinkedIn too. Not all law firms are the same, but based on how useful a social medium is to both attorneys and potential clients, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn are really 3 good places to start. As I said, just as there are many online directories, not all of them are equally beneficial to attorneys. Each platform, of course, has its own culture and guidelines. Twitter with its sort of promotion of brevity at 140 characters, LinkedIn being best for peer-to-peer contact and referrals. So consider how you want to use the platform in question and what benefit it will actually provide your law firm and your potential clients before you sign up. So, using social media effectively. The right social media platforms used wisely can really help drive traffic to your law firm's website and blog. So if I haven't said it enough yet, do be selective about the sites that you choose. You can use platforms like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn to promote recent blog posts that you've written. But do you have to write a new blog post as a status update on your Facebook? And the answer to that is no, not at all, in fact. When you use social media the right way, you'll spend a really minimum amount of effort to promote your work. And if you have good technology to assist you in this effort, that helps too. So instead of copying and pasting the text of your blog into a new post on Facebook or LinkedIn, what you should do instead is link to the original blog post. And don't forget to write a catchy title and add a relevant picture to increase your engagement. If you are short on time, using a system like LawLytics, which allows you to update all of your relevant social media with just a couple clicks, can help you promote your work quickly and increase your productivity. In the first part of this series, I briefly discussed the idea that a lack of engagement with content, and whether it's that you're not adding new evergreen content to your site or you're not blogging often, can signal disinterest to potential clients who are looking at your web presence. And it's important to stay engaged on social media as well. When you promote your blogs on social media, you can help to drive traffic to your website, but it also helps others on social media share your message from within that platform, which of course hopefully drives even more traffic to your site. So by writing those pieces that provide useful information, especially when that information is new, surprising, shocking, you increase the likelihood that such a piece will be shared by others who find it relevant to their interests, or maybe they know someone who will find it interesting. Where shareable pieces are concerned, you may want to try creating and sharing infographics on your law firm's social media. Infographics really help to provide a lot of information without having to commit to a lengthy read, and they're ideal for sharing with others online. But again, making sure that you have a solid content foundation is really critical before you start on some of those other projects. Promoting your blog posts, great way to increase your visibility, but social media is also a good place to generate discussions and interest in your work outside of your blog's comment section. Social media is not a one-way street, and in order to increase interactions with your potential clients and with your referral sources, it's important to think about your own interactions too. So you can use your social media to ask questions, to create polls, to gather information that may even help you write better blogs that answer your potential clients' questions. And tagging others in posts and tweets can really help to improve your networking and to heighten your visibility. Now, here I write generating discussions where appropriate, and that's a topic that I want to bring up because sometimes generating discussions can go a little bit awry. Here are some things that you may want to avoid. opinions about certain things that can be beneficial to your business. Now, for example, an immigration attorney might have the ability to, say, take a very strong political stance in that they may not care about alienating one side. Or if you're very pro-business, you're a business attorney and you only represent insurance companies against liability, clients want to know that you believe in the same things that they do. But for example, for a general DUI attorney, it might be dangerous to take a strong political stance. So when these things come up, before you publish or post something, ask yourself, if I say this to somebody, will all of my potential clients be comfortable with it? Another thing that sometimes comes up, a lot of attorneys sometimes choose to vent about their clients on social media. Assume that whatever you say is part of the permanent record and that there is an easy method of comparing it against everything else that you've said, both in terms of content and consistency. So if somebody takes a quick little screenshot of something that you've said, even if you delete it, screenshots do last forever. One last thing I want to mention here, if you're thinking about hiring somebody to broadcast on social media who isn't a lawyer and who doesn't understand legal ethics, there is some risk inherent in doing that. The average social media expert may not know what words can or can't be used and may not understand legal ethics. And there are all kinds of dangers that can cause you as a DUI attorney a lot of headaches. If you are not controlling your social media in your firm, or if you have someone who understands all of the needs of your firm and legal ethics, then the potential upside of having someone to handle your social media for you is far outweighed by the real and, as Rachel said, the serious potential downside of the problems that can be caused by having a non-lawyer handle your social media presence. So whether you are participating in social media, online legal directories, or anywhere else on the web, it is really important that your focus stays on the marketing that you own and that you control. Social media, as I've said, can be a helpful supplementary tool, but it's important for attorneys to focus their efforts on their own law firm's blog and website, as well as other marketing you own, things like email newsletters. Social media can help you attract potential clients from places other than search engines, but in order to keep their attention, you'll want to provide them with the most relevant and useful information that answers the questions that they have. So not only is social media something that you can easily do yourself, particularly if you're a LawLytics member, you know how easy it is to integrate your social media accounts with us, but also for the fact that it's something that you should do yourself. Don't go delegating your tweets or your Facebook posts to a non-lawyer. Having a designated social media intern can sound really tempting if you think it's going to reduce some sort of workload for you, but as I said, it's also something that can get you into trouble. Take Twitter, for example. You've got a max of 140 characters. What is the worst that could theoretically happen? As it turns out, a lot actually. There was a famous case from either last year or the year before about how one bad tweet can really ruin your life. There was a lady who I won't mention by name who is a PR executive about to go on vacation. She made a couple off-color jokes in a tweet and then hopped on a plane to her vacation destination. And at the time she had maybe 200 followers on Twitter. While this lady was in the air, of course unable to recognize what she'd done or even apologize for it, her tweets started getting a ton of attention and not of the good variety. As I heard one writer put it, Twitter disasters are the quickest source of outrage, and outrage is traffic. So this lady did not have a huge Twitter following before, but now she did, and really for all the wrong reasons. She, in fact, even ended up with her own hashtag as people, I kid you not, tracked her flight across the Atlantic. And much in the same way that many of these stories end, several hours later she became part of a social media disaster that ultimately got her fired from her job. And if you look up her name today on Google, basically all you can find about her is in regard to this incident. So an entire career snuffed out in a couple tweets. Now, back to how this applies to you. While this lady made her own major faux pas, and naturally we'd caution you against that, hiring an intern or a manager or any non-lawyer when it comes to your social media can really cost you big. Now, that said, I mentioned earlier that LawLytics has some fantastic social media features that make it very easy for you to, in a couple clicks, do what you need to do and promote your work on social media. As our LawLytics members know, associating your accounts, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or a variety of other tools are very, very easy to associate with your LawLytics account. It is super easy to announce blog posts, as you can see here. Basically, you click the button that says Announce to Social Media. You type in whatever you'd like to type in. Here it says just released our new report on healthcare fraud under Obamacare, which of course is not relevant to DUI attorneys, but you can type in whatever would be a relevant status update, and then underneath all you have to do is click the appropriate sites that you want to post that to. Then you click the green publish button, boom, done. So that said, LawLytics makes social media super easy, and if that's something that you're thinking about, feel free to get in touch with us and ask us more about that or more about our system. With that, I'm going to turn the mic back over to Dan, and he's going to talk to you a little bit more about those metrics that matter.
Great.
Dan?
Thank you, Tori. So when I left off after my introduction, we were looking at this slide, and I said something to the effect of the metrics that you see in this slide provide a true north. They speak clearly, they cut through the noise and the distractions that are often out there in terms of legal marketing. And the signal that they provide can light the way for law firms to really grow to meet even their biggest, hairiest, and most audacious goals. If a marketing activity does not increase your law firm's profits, then why do it? I've heard too many lawyers say that they essentially work for, well, insert the name of the marketing medium here, whether it's the Yellow Pages or certain internet companies or whatever. So unless an ego is in control of your law firm, bigger just for the sake of bigger without a corresponding increase in profits is pure vanity. It also becomes exhausting very quickly. For law firms who are already engaged in online marketing, we find that the easiest thing to do when they come on board LawLytics is to help them increase their profits by making what their firm already has work better. And this can happen by plugging the leaks and getting rid of illusions, and then simply reallocating the firm's investments of their time and their money into things that actually drive profit. And by doing so, it's oftentimes very easy and very rapid to increase the firm's return on investment, and sometimes even drastically. This is essentially the first step before moving to increase revenues. This maximizes the firm's return over time, and it also paves the way for exponential growth when it's time to really start driving additional revenue. Once marketing profitability is dialed in, even on a small scale, then it's easy and predictable to throw more fuel on the fire. But this part is where most lawyers and law firms unfortunately get on the wrong track. In chasing growth, they start listening to the wrong voices, they start delegating to the wrong people, they start chasing the wrong metrics, and as soon as it starts to look like a triathlete training for something like the Ironman, eating nothing but cannolis. So you can get a nice burst of energy from a sugar rush from eating pastries, but the success of your online marketing is an endurance race. A temporary increase in profits or in revenue can actually be quite dangerous to your law firm when it's not replicable. And unfortunately, a little luck early on in the marketing game can really, over the long haul, set your law firm far off course. And the worst thing that can happen to your law firm early on is to experience some success and not know why. For that reason, number 3 in the list above is extremely important. So how do you know whether you're on the right track or the wrong track? Let's start this question by taking a look at some of the most common metrics that are used to measure growth in law firm marketing. These metrics that you see on this screen, although common, provide empty calories, much like a cannoli would for a triathlete. The list you see here is far from exhaustive, and the purpose of this webinar is not to go into great detail about all of the various myriad ways that SEO and marketing speak can set your law firm on the wrong course. But by looking at a few of these examples, our hope is that it causes you to think critically about all the metrics that are presented to you and your firm so you can determine whether you're following a good map or a bad one. To start out with, there are hundreds of different quote-unquote scores that are available and that purport to grade the success or the potential success of websites. Many of these scores, which oftentimes come along with detailed reports, are readily available to any marketing salesperson to buy and white label. In fact, if you Google something like marketing reports for salespeople, you'll see how easy it is to get these reports, and you may even recognize some that have been sent to you. As lawyers, we're all pretty used to getting good grades, and so when it comes to the point where we find out from a report that we've got a C- or a D+ or even an A-, it can tend to make us all feel a little uneasy. But without all of the information about your firm, your practice, your client base, your referral base, the market dynamics in your area, and external forces that drive public awareness such as DUI checkpoints, different anti-DUI campaigns, politicians that are campaigning to maybe lower the legal limit, newness of drug-related DUI laws and so forth. Without having access to this actual intelligence about the actual potential clients and referral sources that interact with your law firm's website, these reports are simply a number, even though they might be produced by a computer algorithm. And when it comes to online marketing, really the only algorithms that truly matter are Google's algorithms. And no amount of SEO doublespeak can render any other score on any other report useful to you and your law firm. So to put this in perspective, think about AVO ratings in your area. If you look up DUI attorneys in your area on AVO, and for those of you who are not already nodding your heads in agreement, visit avvo.com, avvo.com, and simply do some searches for your peers. You'll see that when you search for your peers, there's a rating scale that goes from 1 to 10, 10 being the best. And you'll see that a lot of attorneys are rated a perfect 10 out of 10, even though you know from being an attorney that has inside information because you see them practicing that they're far from a 10. And you'll also see attorneys that haven't paid attention to their AVO rating that might be the best attorneys in your area, maybe even your state, that don't have a 10.0 rating. And so there's a real life analogy there that I think can help put it into perspective what these SEO reports really do. Moving on to the next three that we'll take kind of all together: hits, clicks, and visits. SEO snake oil salespeople oftentimes use the terms hits, clicks, and visits, but these metrics are not necessarily related to increasing profits and increasing revenues, and sometimes they actually prove to be erosive of profits. It doesn't really matter how many people click on your website, if they're from a click farm in India or Russia, or if they're nuns in a convent, or if they're mad mothers, for example. Hits, clicks, and visits to your site simply don't move the needle at all when these people are not your audience. And that goes for metrics like Facebook likes and Twitter followers as well. Making an argument that these metrics matter in terms of profit is like arguing for admission of hearsay evidence. In a certain context, with certain information, they could be relevant, but it's incumbent upon you, the attorney, to hold yourself accountable for the discipline of properly qualifying these things in the context of the return on investment that they actually produce for your firm. One more, and then we'll move on. Rank is another red herring. lots of marketers try to entice attorneys by focusing on getting to quote-unquote the top of Google. And many attorneys who spend a lot of money and a lot of time is trying to get to the top of Google, arrive at certain search terms at the top of Google to find that they really didn't increase their profits, their revenue, or the repeatability of either. We go into great detail in an SEO article on the LawLytics website, and the link to it is there. So go to lawlytics.com/SEO, and you'll be able to read more about the different tricks and traps and things to avoid. Let's move on to the next slide. When you focus on profits and you focus on revenues and the repeatability of both, you break free from SEO doublespeak and snake oil. Your efforts start to transform your law firm's website into an appreciating asset that not only generates perpetual business for your law firm with minimal additional expense, your law firm website actually becomes an asset in and of itself that has intrinsic value. In fact, we have customers who have ignored all the red herrings, who have avoided the cannoli diet, so to speak, who have followed our content-based strategies and recommendations, and who have built multi-million-dollar a year revenue-generating DUI practices. Their websites continue to feed them while they're practicing, and these websites will be able to be sold when they retire from law or they end up switching gears. And I know because I've done something similar myself with my DUI website from my own practice. By building your website with a focus on content rather than on tricks and doing what works and repeating it over and over again, your website can literally provide a retirement for yourself or at least a healthy annuity when you decide to switch gears. If this stuff were easy, everybody would be doing it. The brutal truth is that creating online success is in fact simple in terms of what you need to do, but it's hard work and it takes time. And most of the risk comes from the choices that you make. And so I want to talk about some of the various forms of risk that we see attorneys foolishly or unnecessarily engaging in. The first is misguided efforts. The saying garbage in, garbage out applies here to your law firm's website. The more you do of the wrong things, the more they'll tend to amplify your problems. Next is deficient execution. Lawyers who become wildly successful don't dabble. They don't dabble in terms of typically being generalists in terms of their practice selection, and they don't do it in terms of their marketing either. When it comes to their marketing, they learn how it works, and they form the healthy habit of repeating what works over and over and over again. The lawyers who fail at online marketing typically fail because they do a little bit and then they give up or they get distracted by a litany of SEO snake oil advice from people who will never, ever, ever stop calling your office to offer it. The next is your intake system. Sometimes lawyers tend to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory when it comes to intake. They do everything right in their marketing, but then they neglect the next portion of the revenue journey. They fail to have adequate intake systems, reception, and follow-up. So if you're doing everything right in your marketing and you're getting leads, or at least you think you are, it might make sense to look at your intake system. And if you are not sure that you're getting calls because you're out in court all day representing DUI clients and you have a receptionist back at the office, it may be a good idea to track your calls and make sure that you're actually getting a true report of what's coming in and that you're making the most of those calls that you're getting. The next risk is bad targeting. Most marketers, especially those who are generalists and do focus on more types of business than just law firms, don't understand how to differentiate the business dynamics of different practice areas and really how different not only the messaging can be, the methodology, but also the targeting. If you're a DUI attorney with a social media campaign targeting things like Instagram and Pinterest, there's a good chance that you're barking up the wrong tree. Most people don't follow DUI attorneys. They look them up when they're needed. And if you're trying to optimize for keywords such as quote-unquote DUI attorney, you're inviting snake oil salespeople to call your office, but you're likely missing a lot of the audience that will lead to increased profits and revenue. We talk a lot about the long tail of the internet and how that works in other webinars, and we did in the first series of this webinar. If you don't understand what I'm talking about in terms of this, it makes sense to double back, listen to that webinar, and listen to other webinars that we've done about SEO, because it really, the money is not made at those high-level search terms. It's made in the questions that your potential clients have when they're searching Google and the other search engines. And those questions really tend to be the same questions that they're asking when they're on the phone with you, and the same questions that they're asking when they're sitting across your desk or conference table from you. And finally, another risk is unsupportable market. This seems very basic, but we've seen lawyers try to squeeze more juice out of an orange that's essentially already done. So for example, if you're in a market of 500,000 citizens, let's say there's 2,000 or 3,000 DUI arrests a year, and there's 100 attorneys, there's maybe 1,000 of those that are going to go to private attorneys, and you're already capturing a very large portion of that traffic. By trying to get more traffic, for example, you may be trying to address people that don't have cases and couldn't possibly need your services. So it's important to know your total addressable market and then optimize around that. So for example, if you're already getting the right amount of visitors from the locations that you practice in to support the amount of arrests for people that can afford a private attorney, then you want to look at other things such as what are they doing when they're coming to your site? What materials are they interacting with? How is the flow and the design of your site set up? How does it make your potential clients understand what you do? How does it cause them to like you and to want to contact you and ultimately hire you? And so it's really important for you to be aware of all those things, because in all likelihood, no matter what marketer you hire, they are not. Let's move on to the next slide. For an attorney who really wants to dive deep into the subject of search engine optimization, we have plenty of resources at the LawLytics website, both in terms of the blog and in terms of the dozens, if not over 100 hours worth of webinars that we've done. But even despite the volume of advice and content that's out there, success is not complicated. In fact, contrary to what most SEO salespeople will tell you, search engine optimization is not even hard, and you can learn everything that you need to learn about the basics, and this is enough to get your firm pretty much anywhere you want to go with it within a couple of hours. Doing search engine optimization or SEO the right way really boils down to content. Your content is the lifeblood of your website success, and without good content added on a regular basis that addresses questions that your potential clients and referral sources actually have, nothing else that you ever do, no amount of SEO tricks, no amount of money that you can pay to anybody that purports to provide them, will ever produce results. Although we've said it many times before, it bears repeating. Write for the audience that leads to increased profits and revenues for your law firm. Write for your potential clients, for your referral sources, and for the people that influence them, not for the search engines. And finally, I want to say that on this topic, 99% of sound SEO strategy is simply saying no to what 99% of SEO salespeople are trying to get you to buy. We have a few more slides here. I know we're coming right up on the hour, and I'm going to speed through the last of these because they're important foundational aspects. So the first is reputation management. The internet is the first impression that nearly all of your potential clients are going to get of you and your firm, even if they're referred to you. They're going to interact with your web presence. If you don't have control over your reputation, so if there are a bunch of bad reviews about you, not a bunch of good ones, if the things that they're seeing about you are out of your control, that's a really bad thing. And no matter what you do on your website, those things that are outside of your website can come back and hurt you, even to the extent of preventing you from getting most clients that interact. And so for that reason, we strongly suggest that you pay attention to getting reviews, displaying reviews, and dealing with negative reviews. The link that you see is at the bottom of this slide, links to our reputation management section. There's also a webinar that you can find in the webinars area that deals in detail with the subject of reviews and reputation management. If you're a LawLytics member, we have a Bird Eye add-on that's available to you that will help you get and curate reviews, help you deal with bad ones and so forth. So if you're interested in that, let us know. If you're not a LawLytics member, we strongly suggest that you look into managing your reputation concurrently with doing everything else that you need to do on your website. Let's move on to the next slide here. Reputation management ties very closely into local marketing, and a lot of vendors tend to make the subject of local marketing a lot more complicated than it actually is for the purpose of trying to sell lawyers things that they really don't need to be paying for. We find that most attorneys, especially those that practice DUI in a localized area, tend to have a very easy task of claiming and managing their local listings. Things that we've literally seen companies charge $500 or more a month to do can literally be done by you with a little bit of guidance in about 10 minutes, and there really is no monthly maintenance that is necessary. At a basic level, you want to make sure that your local listings are claimed, that addresses are consolidated if you have more than one listing, say on the Google map and so forth, and that everything is consistent. Beyond that, it pretty much takes care of itself when you do good work on your website and when you are doing your best to get reviews. The other piece of it is local content marketing, and Rachel touched upon that, and her team deal with that a lot when they're writing content for our LawLytics members. And especially if you're practicing DUI law in a localized area, you have really almost infinite amount of local content that you can do. You can talk about the various police agencies, you can talk about courts, you can talk about jails, you can talk about processing stations, you can talk about places where there might be checkpoints, you can talk about different places where phleboto cops end up drawing blood, or different hospitals that people are taken to, or whether blood is drawn at the station. You can even talk about intersections or roads that are notorious for people getting DUIs on. And so there's an infinite amount of information that you can really drill down on that not only will help you fulfill the need to have enough content to rank well, but to really triangulate in on the specific questions that your clients, especially those that have been recently arrested and see that they have to appear in some county or muni court or whatever, are looking for. And so when you're using LawLytics, it's pretty easy to do it, especially you can click and insert a map or maps to different courthouses and so forth. And we highly recommend that you do this. It's a low-cost, very effective method of increasing your local marketing. I want to spend just a moment talking about paid online ads, and I highly encourage you to use the link at the bottom of the slide to join us tomorrow morning. We're going to go really deep on paid advertising. Bottom line is that paid advertising is a source for a lot of wasted money, a lot of wasted effort, and a lot of wasted hopes for attorneys. It's become very expensive. In some areas, it's become cost prohibitive, but in some areas and under some circumstances, it can still produce business when it's done right. The takeaways that we're going to be talking about in the webinar tomorrow, and if you don't catch that, what I think you ought to know is that when you get pay-per-click advertising, if you think you need it, do not start by using a middleman. Go directly to the source. For search engine marketing, Google sells it directly and Bing sells it directly. Both of these companies will provide you help getting your account set up. Both of them will provide you phone support while you're going along. And by going directly to the source, not only are you able to understand what you can do without spending money on a middleman or a reseller or a consultant for that matter, but you'll be able to set a baseline to understand, okay, if I did X amount in the first 3 months going directly through Google, I know how much revenue I'm either going to gain or lose by doing pay-per-click for 3 months. Now, when I'm thinking about potentially engaging a pay-per-click management company and paying their 20% fee or their $1,000 a month management fee or however they do that, you'll have a baseline at that point to understand after a very short amount of time, a matter of a couple months, whether that firm is doing something better for you, whether they're actually earning their management fee by making the diminished amount that you're then spending on these ads go further for you, or whether they're like most mutual fund managers where they're actually taking your money in order to give you the appearance that they're managing something and they actually are underperforming the market. If you do engage in pay-per-click marketing, for God's sake, do not rely on it exclusively. It is really important to have an exit strategy, meaning that one day you could wake up if you're reliant on pay-per-click marketing and you could be outbid to the point where raising your bid enough to get any business through pay-per-click marketing makes it unprofitable for you to take a case. And at that point, you're essentially out of business or you're just working for the fun of it. And so it's really important to understand that. It's also really important to avoid buying pay-per-click marketing through a reseller who is also purportedly responsible for your organic search results. And that's because there's a conflict of interest. The conflict of interest should be obvious, but to just spell it out real quickly, if the company is getting paid based on the amount that you're spending on pay-per-click advertising, they're incentivized at that point to make sure that you're always spending money on it. And if they're not working to increase your organic search engine results to the point where you can actually wean yourself off of pay-per-click, you not only don't have an exit strategy, they have a perpetual source of revenue that's really happening at your expense. We'll go into more detail on that tomorrow. For now, let's move into the next slide. And this is the final substantive slide that I have today. And I want to just talk briefly about your technology stack. So as you get further into this and as you get more success with your marketing, you'll see how easily everything needs to tie together. So, for example, you use LawLytics to get clients through your website. once you have a certain amount of clients, and this has happened to a number of our customers, you get to the point where you really need an intake system to manage those. We've had customers come to us and say, can I remove my phone number from my website because I'm getting too many calls, I want to just rely on web-based leads. We've had attorneys who are getting so many leads it's impossible for them to follow up. And so you might think about adding something like an intake system to your technology stack. For example, Lexicata provides a very good tool to take the leads that are generated through using LawLytics and then quantify them, follow up with them, and make sure that you know what's happening with them. LawLytics does provide a native integration with them, so it's really easy, especially if you're a LawLytics customer already. If you want to try Lexicata out, to integrate. It's a matter of a couple clicks, and then you can send your intake forms directly to it en masse, or you can choose which ones you send over to it on a case-by-case basis. Same with technology like Clio. LawLytics also integrates natively with Clio, so you can, if you're using Clio to manage your practice, you can send your clients that you get through LawLytics from the LawLytics system directly into Clio. And then we have customers who have optimize their technology stack so well that they get the lead, it goes through LawLytics, it goes through an intake system, it goes to their office, it goes to their cell phone. They might be driving in their car from court to court, and they pull over, they talk to the client immediately, the client retains them, and they click another button and a retainer agreement is instantly sent to that client. The transaction occurs online via credit card, and that client is all set up, and the office has processed the whole intake of that case by the time the attorney gets back from court. There's a lot that can be done there, and as you think about really expanding from the growth stage into the domination phase, which we'll talk about next month, it's really important to make sure that the rest of your infrastructure, in addition to your marketing, is ready to scale with it. With that, let's go on to the final slide here. We're just about done, and I know we've gone a little bit over today, and I'm just about concluded, but I just want to have a couple more moments to tie this together. Growing a law firm's web presence is not rocket science, but it does take time and effort, and it's something that really requires a commitment from you and your law firm. When you focus on the right things and you form healthy habits around doing them consistently, and at the same time when you avoid SEO snake oil sales and foolish dependence on pay-per-click marketing, and when you have your reputation management in place, your local listings are claimed, growth just happens. If you haven't seen the first webinar in this series, I highly recommend going back to it, even if you think you're beyond the basics, because there are a lot of foundational elements that you can get from that webinar to help you get started on the right track. It's available now on demand if you go to lawlytics.com/webinars. Even if you're on the right track, you're already growing, I hope that you'll be able to get something out of that. I hope that today's webinar also provided some useful information and some inspiration to stay focused on finding, repeating, and then refining what works and removing and changing what doesn't. I hope you'll join us next month for the final webinar in this series, where we're going to look at some things that will really move the needle in a meaningful way once you've gotten to the point where you're getting all the business you think that you could handle from your law firm's website. With that, I want to thank Sophia, Rachel, and Victoria for your presentations. I want to thank everybody who attended for watching this webinar. I hope it helped, and I hope to see you again soon. And with that, we will go ahead and end the recording and see if there are any questions.